The Forbidden Law. The Grand Hall of the Centauri Council shimmered with an otherworldly glow. It was a place of power, where decisions that shaped entire galaxies were made. Today, the air crackled with tension as the council debated a law that would define the future of their people. The humans are a volatile species, declared High Chancellor Tholif, his silver robes billowing as he addressed the assembly. His voice was calm, yet it carried an edge that demanded attention. Their unpredictability is dangerous. Allowing any Centauri to form emotional connections with them is a risk we cannot afford. Kalara sat in the audience, her heart sinking with every word. As one of the youngest diplomats in Centauri history, she had spent years learning about other species, including humans. Unlike the Council's rigid stance, she had always admired humanity's creativity, resilience, and passion. But her admiration had to remain a secret. The Centauri were a species of logic and control, and emotions, especially love, were seen as weaknesses. The Council voted unanimously. The decree was passed. Any Centauri who developed a relationship with a human would be branded a traitor and exiled. The punishment didn't end there. Exiles had their memories erased, their very identities wiped clean. It was a fate worse than death for their kind. As the assembly dispersed, Kalara lingered behind, her thoughts racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that this law was more about fear than logic. Humans had proven themselves capable of great destruction, but they were also capable of remarkable kindness. Why couldn't the council see that? Kalara. A deep voice interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Rinvek, one of the council's enforcers. His piercing gaze made her uneasy. "You've been assigned to the Earth Embassy. It's a great honor." Kalara nodded, masking her discomfort. She knew what this meant. Rinvek would be monitoring her every move, ensuring she adhered to the council's decree. The Centauri trusted no one, not even their own. Earth was everything Kalara had imagined and more. The sprawling cities, the vibrant cultures, the endless skies. It was a world full of life and color, so different from the sterile perfection of her home planet. But it was also chaotic, loud, and unpredictable, much like the humans themselves. On her first day at the embassy, she met Ethan. He was a human engineer assigned to assist the Centauri with technology integration. Unlike the other humans who seemed intimidated by her presence, Ethan treated her like an equal. He spoke to her with a warm smile, his tone easy and genuine. "Welcome to Earth," he said, extending a hand. "If you need anything, just let me know." Kalara hesitated before shaking his hand, an unusual gesture for her species. His touch was warm, grounding in a way she didn't expect. She quickly pulled her hand back, reminding herself of the council's decree. Ethan was kind, but she couldn't afford to get too close. Days turned into weeks, and despite her efforts to maintain a professional distance, Kalara found herself drawn to Ethan. He was curious about her culture, asking questions that no one else dared to. In return, he shared stories about Earth, its history, its people, and its dreams for the future. One evening, a minor accident at the embassy changed everything. A malfunctioning energy core threatened to explode, and chaos erupted as people scrambled for safety. Kalara froze, her logical mind struggling to calculate a solution in the midst of the panic. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed to the core, risking his life to stabilize the system. The explosion was narrowly averted, and the humans cheered as the danger passed. Kalara approached Ethan, her voice trembling. "You could have been killed. Why would you take such a risk?" He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. Not everything in life can be calculated, you know." Kalara didn't respond. For the first time, she realized that humans were more than the sum of their flaws. They had a spark, an unpredictability that was both terrifying and beautiful. But she also knew that her growing admiration for Ethan was dangerous. If the council discovered her feelings, the consequences would be dire. Late that night, as Kalara stared at the stars through her quarters window, A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. It was a message from Rinvik. "You are being watched," it read. "Do not forget the law." Kaelara's blood ran cold. She knew the council would not tolerate any deviation from their rules. But as she thought about Ethan's bravery, his warmth, and his unwavering belief in doing what was right, she felt a spark of defiance. For now, she would keep her distance. She would bury her feelings deep, where no one could find them. But a part of her wondered how long she could suppress the truth. Could she truly deny what her heart already knew? In the silence of her room, Kaelara whispered to herself, "What happens when the forbidden becomes impossible to ignore?" The stars outside seemed to shimmer in response, as if urging her to find the answer. An unlikely connection. The Earth Embassy was a hive of activity, a place where cultures collided and cooperation was more a necessity than a choice. Kaelara had always prided herself on her ability to adapt, but Earth was testing her limits. Humans were loud, expressive, and utterly unpredictable, a stark contrast to the controlled, calculated demeanor of the Centauri. Yet, something about their chaotic energy intrigued her. Ethan had become a familiar presence at the embassy, his easy smile and quick wit a welcome relief amidst the endless formalities of interstellar diplomacy. He was always tinkering with something, his hands deftly repairing machinery that seemed beyond saving. Kaelara often found herself watching him from a distance, fascinated by the way he approached problems with equal parts logic and instinct. One afternoon, Kaelara's curiosity got the better of her. She approached Ethan as he worked on a faulty translator device, its internal circuits sparking in protest. "Why do you insist on fixing that? It would be more efficient to replace it," she said, her tone more curious than critical. Ethan looked up, his eyes bright with amusement. "Maybe, but where's the fun in that? Sometimes, fixing things teaches you more than starting fresh." Kaelara tilted her head, considering his words. "In Centauri culture, efficiency is paramount. We discard what no longer serves its purpose." Ethan chuckled, the sound warm and disarming. "Well, that explains why you guys are so advanced. But humans, we're sentimental. We like to hold on to things, even if they're a little broken. Sometimes, those imperfections make something more valuable." Kaelara didn't respond immediately. Instead, she watched as Ethan carefully reassembled the device, his movements precise yet relaxed. His words lingered in her mind, challenging the principles she had been taught her entire life. That evening, a violent storm swept through the city, its winds howling like a feral beast. The embassy's power systems faltered, plunging the building into darkness. Emergency protocols activated, and Kaelara found herself guiding panicked staff to safety. As she reached the control room, she was surprised to find Ethan already there, his flashlight casting long shadows across the walls. "Figured I'd find you here," he said with a grin. "This place is like a maze in the dark." Kaelara crossed her arms, her voice firm. "You should be with the others. It's not safe." Ethan shrugged, unbothered by her tone. "Someone has to stabilize the power grid. Unless you're planning to do it yourself." Kaelara hesitated. The embassy's systems were unfamiliar to her, and the storm was making remote communication impossible. Ethan seemed to sense her doubt. "Relax," he said, pulling a small toolkit from his bag. "I got this." Despite her better judgment, Kaelara stayed. She watched as Ethan navigated the complex controls with a confidence that was both infuriating and impressive. He explained each step as he worked, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Why do you do this?" she asked suddenly. "Why risk yourself for others?" Ethan paused, glancing at her. "Because that's what humans do. We look out for each other, even when it's messy or inconvenient. Isn't that what diplomacy is about?" Kaelara opened her mouth to respond, but found herself at a loss for words. In that moment, she realized that Ethan embodied something the Centauri had long dismissed as weakness, the ability to care deeply, even recklessly. The storm subsided by morning, leaving the city battered but intact. The embassy's systems were restored, thanks in no small part to Ethan's efforts. As the staff celebrated their survival, Kalara found herself standing apart, her thoughts racing. Ethan approached her, his expression unreadable. "You're awfully quiet for someone who just survived a storm." Kalara glanced at him, her voice softer than usual. "I was thinking about what you said, about humans." He raised an eyebrow. "And you confuse me," she admitted. "Your species is illogical, yet you achieve remarkable things. You embrace chaos, yet you find ways to thrive. I don't understand it." Ethan smiled, his gaze steady. "Maybe you don't have to understand it. Maybe you just have to accept it." Kalara considered his words, a small spark of realization flickering within her. For all their flaws, humans possessed a depth that the Centauri had long overlooked. And for the first time, she began to wonder if that depth was worth exploring. Later that night, as Kalara reviewed reports in her quarters, a message appeared on her screen. It was from Rinvek, the Council's enforcer. "You are forming an attachment," it read. "Remember the law." Kalara's hands trembled as she closed the message. The Council's eyes were everywhere, and she knew the consequences of defying their decree. But as she thought about Ethan's courage and kindness, a question took root in her mind. What if the Council was wrong? What if the connection she felt wasn't a weakness, but a strength? The stars outside seemed to shimmer with possibility, as if urging her to find the answers for herself. Secrets in the shadows. The days following the storm were a whirlwind of repairs and diplomatic meetings, but for Kalara, the real storm was within. She couldn't forget the moments she had shared with Ethan. His bravery, his kindness, and his unwavering belief in the human spirit had left an imprint on her thoughts. Yet, lurking behind her growing admiration was the constant reminder of the law. A silent predator waiting for her to slip. Her unease grew when she noticed subtle changes in her environment. Small anomalies, like the faint hum of an unauthorized device in her quarters, or the way conversations abruptly ended when she entered a room, hinted at something sinister. It didn't take long for her to confirm her suspicions. The Council was watching her. One evening, while reviewing reports in her quarters, Kalara's communication device buzzed with an encrypted message. She hesitated before opening it. The message read, "You are being watched. Do not trust anyone. Rinvek." Her stomach twisted. Rinvek was the Council's most loyal enforcer, a figure known for his unwavering adherence to the law. Why would he warn her? Was this a trap, or was there something more to his loyalty? Before she could dwell on the message, a sharp knock echoed through her quarters. Startled, she quickly hid the device. When the door slid open, Ethan stood there, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by something more serious. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice low. Kalara hesitated but nodded. Once inside, Ethan handed her a small device wrapped in cloth. "I found this in the embassy's control room," he said. "It's a tracker, and it's not human-made." Kalara's heart raced. She carefully unwrapped the device, her fears confirmed as she recognized the intricate design. It was Centauri technology, designed to monitor movements and conversations. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice tight. Ethan shrugged, his gaze steady. "Because I think someone's spying on you. And because I trust you." His words caught her off guard. Trust was a fragile thing among the Centauri, given only after rigorous tests of loyalty. Yet here was Ethan, offering it so freely. Kalara felt a pang of guilt. He didn't know the danger he was in by associating with her. Determined to uncover the truth, Kalara began investigating the tracker. Late at night, when the embassy was quiet, she accessed the Centauri systems, carefully bypassing security protocols. What she found sent chills down her spine. The tracker wasn't just monitoring her. It was transmitting data directly to the Council. Every interaction, every movement, every word spoken in her presence was being recorded. Worse, there were files on Ethan. His background, his work, even their private conversations had been meticulously logged. Kaelara's hands clenched into fists. The council wasn't just watching her, they were preparing to act. She knew what that meant. If they deemed her a threat, they would strike swiftly, and Ethan would be collateral damage. The next day, Kaelara confronted Rinvek. She found him in the embassy's observation deck, his tall figure silhouetted against the Earth's setting sun. "You've been monitoring me," she said without preamble. "Why?" Rinvek turned, his expression as unreadable as ever. "It is my duty to ensure the laws are upheld." "Then why warn me?" Kaelara pressed, stepping closer. "Why not report me outright?" For a moment, Rinvek said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "Because I know what it's like to question the council." Kaelara stared at him, stunned. Rinvek had always been the epitome of loyalty. To hear such an admission from him was like seeing a star go dark. But his words carried weight. If he doubted the council, then perhaps her growing defiance wasn't as foolish as she had feared. Before she could ask more, Rinvek straightened, his professional mask snapping back into place. "Be careful, Kaelara. The council will not tolerate further deviation. And remember, humans are not your allies. They will only bring ruin." With that, he left, leaving Kaelara more conflicted than ever. That night, Kaelara met Ethan in a secluded part of the embassy gardens. She told him everything: the tracker, the council's surveillance, and the danger they were both in. Ethan listened in silence, his face unreadable. When she finished, he said, "So what's the plan?" Kaelara blinked. "Plan? Ethan, this isn't a problem you can fix with a wrench. The council doesn't negotiate." Ethan's lips twitched in a faint smile. "You'd be surprised what humans can fix. But first, we need to figure out what they're really after." Kaelara hesitated. Letting Ethan involve himself further was reckless, but she couldn't deny that his resourcefulness might be their best chance. Reluctantly, she nodded. As they began working together to uncover the council's true motives, Kaelara felt a strange sense of hope. For the first time, she wasn't facing the shadows alone. But lurking in the back of her mind was the fear that this fragile alliance might come at a cost neither of them could afford to pay. The council's wrath. The summons came without warning. A sleek, silver Centauri drone arrived at the Earth Embassy, its glowing message sphere unfolding like a flower in Kaelara's quarters. The voice of High Chancellor Thaliv resonated through the room, cold and commanding. "Kaelara of the Centauri, your actions have been called into question. You are to report to the council immediately for an inquiry. Any failure to comply will result in disciplinary measures." The sphere closed and disintegrated, leaving Kaelara staring at the empty space where it had been. Her heart pounded. The council never summoned anyone without purpose, and she knew exactly why she was being called. The journey to the council station was swift and silent. Rinvek accompanied her, his demeanor colder than usual. The air inside the transport ship was thick with unspoken tension. "You should have been more careful," Rinvek said finally, breaking the silence. Kaelara's jaw tightened. "You knew this would happen." "I warned you," Rinvek replied, his voice low but firm. "But you chose to ignore the risks. Now you'll face the consequences." Kaelara wanted to argue, but the weight of his words pressed down on her. She didn't regret her actions, but she couldn't deny the fear curling in her stomach. The council's judgment was absolute. The Centauri Council chamber was as imposing as ever. A massive circular room with high arched ceilings that glimmered with starlight. It seemed designed to make anyone standing at its center feel small. Kaelara stood there now, her gaze fixed on the semi-transparent figures of the council members seated above her. High Chancellor Thaliv's voice boomed across the chamber. "Kaelara, you have been accused of forming an emotional connection with a human. A violation of Centauri law. Do you deny this?" Kaelara took a deep breath. "I deny nothing, Chancellor." A murmur rippled through the chamber, the translucent forms flickering in apparent shock. Thaliv's expression darkened. "You admit to defying the laws that safeguard our people." I admit to questioning a law that fails to consider the complexities of the universe, Kalara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Humans are not the danger we believe them to be. They have flaws, yes, but they also have strengths we could learn from. The council erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, some calling for her exile, others demanding further investigation. Only Thaliv remained silent, his gaze fixed on Kalara like a predator assessing its prey. When the room finally quieted, Thaliv leaned forward. Your defiance is noted, but words alone cannot absolve you. We have evidence of your interactions with the human, Ethan. Do you deny the depth of this connection? Kalara hesitated. Denial might spare her, but it would condemn Ethan. She squared her shoulders, meeting Thaliv's gaze. I do not deny it. Ethan has shown me the value of humanity. If that makes me guilty, so be it. The council's deliberation was swift. Within minutes, the verdict was delivered. You are hereby stripped of your diplomatic status and sentenced to exile, Thaliv declared. Your memories of this human and your time on Earth will be erased. You will be returned to Centauri space, where you will live out your days in anonymity. Kalara's chest tightened. Exile she could endure, but losing her memories. That was a cruelty she hadn't anticipated. As guards approached to escort her away, Rinvek stepped forward. Chancellor, if I may speak. Thaliv raised a hand, silencing the murmurs of the council. You may. Rinvek's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. Erasing her memories may ensure compliance, but it will not address the greater issue. If the council is so concerned about humanity's influence, perhaps we should examine why one of our own was so easily drawn to them. Thaliv's eyes narrowed. Are you questioning the council's judgment, Rinvek? Not at all, Rinvek replied smoothly. I merely suggest that exile alone may serve as a sufficient deterrent. Let her keep her memories as a reminder of her failure. Kalara's breath caught. She wasn't sure if Rinvek was trying to protect her or manipulate her, but she clung to the hope his words offered. After a tense pause, Thaliv nodded. Very well. She will keep her memories, but she is never to return to Earth or contact the human again. If she does, both will face immediate termination. Kalara was escorted back to the transport ship, her heart heavy with the weight of the council's judgment. Rinvek walked beside her, his expression unreadable. Why did you speak for me? She asked finally. Rinvek glanced at her, his gaze sharp. Because you're not the first Centauri to question the council, and you won't be the last. Before she could respond, he stopped and handed her a small data crystal. You'll need this. It contains the locations of safe zones outside Centauri space. Use it wisely. Kalara stared at the crystal, her mind racing. Rinvek had always been an enforcer of the law. Why was he helping her now? Thank you, she said softly. Don't thank me, Rinvek replied, his tone cool. Just survive. As the ship prepared to leave, Kalara gazed out at the stars, her thoughts drifting to Ethan. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. The council's wrath had only strengthened her resolve. They could exile her, strip her of her status, and threaten her with death, but they couldn't take away what she had learned. And they couldn't take away her hope. Ethan's discovery. Ethan sat in the dimly lit workshop below the Earth Embassy, the faint hum of the repaired systems filling the silence. He hadn't seen Kalara in days, and though no one would admit it, something was wrong. The usually open flow of information between the embassy staff and the Centauri diplomats had dried up. Kalara's absence gnawed at him, her calm yet curious presence replaced by a void that felt heavier with each passing hour. Unable to shake his unease, Ethan decided to investigate. The embassy had strict rules about human access to Centauri files, but he had spent enough time maintaining their systems to understand their vulnerabilities. Using a backdoor he had discovered while fixing their network weeks ago, he accessed Kalara's private logs. What he found shocked him. Kalara's logs detailed her growing concerns about the Centauri Council and the surveillance she had been under. The most alarming entry was a recording, an encrypted message from someone named Rinvik. Ethan played the recording, and his heart sank. Kelara, the Council is preparing to act. Your attachment to the human has not gone unnoticed. They are gathering evidence to justify your exile. Be cautious. They are watching. Ethan leaned back, his mind racing. He had suspected Kelara was under pressure, but this confirmed his worst fears. The Council wasn't just strict. They were ruthless. And now Kelara was their target. Ethan's next step was risky, but he knew it was necessary. He used the Centauri tracker he had found earlier, now reconfigured to trace outgoing signals. If the Council was monitoring Kelara, there had to be a data relay connecting Earth to their main station. After hours of poring over coded transmissions, he found what he was looking for, a faint encrypted signal embedded in the embassy's communications network. It didn't take long for Ethan to decode the signal. The transmission logs revealed that Kelara had been summoned to the Centauri Council station, accused of violating their most sacred law, forming an emotional bond with a human. The logs also hinted at something more sinister. If the Council deemed her a threat, they wouldn't stop at exile. Termination was on the table. Ethan clenched his fists. He had to act, but he couldn't do it alone. Ethan reached out to a contact he never thought he'd need, Dr. Mira Chen, a former diplomat who had spent years negotiating with the Centauri. Mira was one of the few humans who understood their culture well enough to navigate their rigid system of laws. Mira listened as Ethan explained the situation, her brow furrowing with concern. Ethan, you realize how dangerous this is. The Centauri don't take kindly to interference, especially from humans. I don't care, Ethan said firmly. Kelara's in trouble, and she stood up for us. She stood up for me. I'm not going to let her face this alone. Mira studied him for a moment before nodding. If you're serious about this, you'll need leverage. The Council doesn't respect sentiment, but they do respect logic. We need to show them that sparing Kelara benefits them more than punishing her. Ethan's mind raced. Leverage. What could he offer the Council that would make them reconsider their stance? Then it hit him, the energy core. The energy core that Ethan had stabilized during the storm wasn't just a standard power source. It was a prototype, one that combined Centauri and human technology in ways that neither species fully understood. Ethan had been quietly perfecting it for months, and it was a breakthrough that could revolutionize interstellar energy systems. If the Council knew this core existed, they'd want it, Ethan said, pacing Mira's office. It's proof that collaboration between humans and Centauri works. Mira raised an eyebrow. You're proposing to trade a groundbreaking piece of technology for Kelara's freedom. Ethan nodded. It's the only bargaining chip I have. Mira sighed. You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan. But if anyone can pull this off, it's you. Armed with the prototype and a carefully crafted argument, Ethan prepared to leave for the Centauri Council station. Mira secured him passage on a diplomatic transport, using her old connections to bypass security. As the ship hurtled through hyperspace, Ethan replayed Kelara's logs in his mind. Her quiet courage, her curiosity about humanity, and her willingness to challenge her own people. All of it fueled his determination. He didn't know what he would find when he reached the Council, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let Kelara face them alone. When Ethan arrived at the station, the towering crystalline structure loomed before him like a silent judge. The Centauri guards escorted him to the Council chamber, where Kelara stood at the center, her expression calm but her eyes betraying her fear. The Council members turned their gaze to Ethan, their translucent forms shimmering with disdain. Who is this human, and why has he entered our chamber? High Chancellor Philip demanded. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm here to speak on Kelara's behalf, and to show you why your judgment is flawed. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him, including Kelara's, her expression a mix of shock and hope. Ethan held up the prototype core, its soft glow illuminating the chamber. "This device is the result of collaboration between humans and Centauri," he said. "It's proof that our species can achieve greatness together. Exiling Kalara would destroy not just her, but the potential for what we can accomplish." The council murmured among themselves, their holographic forms flickering as they debated. Kalara looked at Ethan, her voice barely audible. "Why are you here?" "You're risking everything." Ethan met her gaze, his voice firm. "Because you're worth it. Because we're worth it." As the council prepared to deliver their verdict, Ethan braced himself. He didn't know if his gamble would pay off, but he knew he had done everything he could to fight for Kalara, and for the future they both believed in: defiance and sacrifice. The Centauri Council chamber was a tempest of shimmering light and sharp whispers. Ethan stood at the center, holding the glowing prototype energy core, its soft hum the only sound cutting through the tension. Beside him, Kalara remained motionless, her composed exterior masking the turmoil raging inside her. High Chancellor Thaliv regarded Ethan with an expression of thinly veiled contempt. "You stand here, human, claiming to challenge our laws with a machine." His voice was cold, his words dripping with disdain. "Do you think a single device is enough to justify the defiance of our most sacred principles?" Ethan met Thalib's gaze, refusing to back down. "This isn't just a device," he said firmly. "It's a symbol of what we can achieve together. Humans and Centauri have more to gain from collaboration than division. Kalara saw that, and you're punishing her for it." Thaliv leaned back, his translucent form pulsing faintly. "Emotional connections cloud judgment. They weaken the foundations of logic that sustain our species. What you call collaboration, we call corruption." Ethan took a step forward, his voice rising. "Corruption? No, Chancellor. What weakens a species is fear. Fear of change, fear of difference. If your laws can't adapt to the universe as it grows, then it's not us who are weak, it's you." A ripple of shock coursed through the chamber. Even Kalara's calm facade broke, her wide eyes darting toward Ethan. No one had ever spoken to the council with such boldness, let alone a human. Thaliv's composure cracked, his voice laced with anger. "You dare challenge us in our own hall? You, a species barely out of its infancy, believe you can lecture the Centauri on strength?" "I dare," Ethan replied, his voice steady, "because I've seen what humans and Centauri can accomplish when we stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as allies." He activated the energy core, and the chamber filled with a radiant light. A holographic display sprang to life, showing simulations of the core's potential: clean, sustainable energy that could power entire planets, revolutionizing interstellar travel and infrastructure. "This core isn't just a piece of technology," Ethan said. "It's proof that our species can create something extraordinary together. But none of that will matter if we let fear and old laws tear us apart." The council members leaned closer, their forms flickering as they absorbed the data. Whispers filled the room, some intrigued, others skeptical. Kalara stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "Chancellor, you speak of logic and preservation. But this," she gestured to the core, "is logic in action. Collaboration is not a threat to our species, it is its evolution. Ethan has risked everything to stand here today because he believes in something greater than himself. Can we say the same?" Thaliv's expression hardened. "Enough. This display of defiance ends now. Kalara, you are guilty of violating our laws. The humans' arguments, while impassioned, do not erase your betrayal." The council murmured in agreement, but before Thaliv could pass the final judgment, Rinvek stepped forward. "Chancellor, if I may," Rinvek said, his deep voice silencing the room. He turned to face the council. "What Kalara and the human have presented is not defiance. It is innovation. The energy core is proof that their actions have merit. Exiling Kalara and rejecting this technology would not only weaken us, but it would also embolden those who believe our laws are outdated." Thaliv's eyes narrowed. "Rinvek, Your allegiance is to the Council, not to rogue diplomats. My allegiance is to the Centauri people, Renvek replied, his tone unwavering. And I believe that this decision will define the future of our species. The chamber fell into a heavy silence as the council deliberated. Ethan and Kaylura stood side by side, their fates hanging in the balance. Minutes felt like hours as the holographic forms debated in hushed tones. Finally, Thalav spoke. The council has reached a decision. Kaylura will not be exiled. However, she will relinquish her diplomatic status and remain under observation. As for the human, Ethan straightened, bracing himself. He will return to Earth immediately. Any further contact with Kaylura will result in the termination of both parties. Ethan's heart sank, but before he could protest, Kaylura placed a hand on his arm. Don't, she whispered. You've done enough. Thalav's gaze bore into them. This is the Council's mercy. Do not test it. As they were escorted out of the chamber, Kaylura turned to Ethan, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry. I never wanted you to pay for my choices. Ethan shook his head. Don't apologize. I'd do it all again. They reached the docking bay, where Ethan's transport back to Earth awaited. Kaylura stood at the threshold, her composed mask slipping. This isn't the end, she said quietly. Not if we don't let it be. Ethan smiled, a bittersweet expression. Then it won't be. Before stepping onto the ship, he handed her a small data chip. This has everything on the core. Keep it safe. It's our proof that this was worth it. Kaylura took the chip, her fingers brushing his. Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Kaylura, he said, his voice heavy with unspoken words. As the transport left the station, Ethan stared out at the stars, determination burning in his chest. The Council might have won this battle, but the fight was far from over. Somewhere out there, Kaylura was watching the same stars, and he knew they were both thinking the same thing. The universe was vast, and the future was unwritten. A new beginning. The Earth Embassy's bright lights faded into the distance as Ethan's transport ship broke through the planet's atmosphere, heading for his home planet. The vastness of space stretched before him, an endless expanse of stars and shadows. Ethan stared out of the window, his mind racing. He had left Kaylura behind, but he hadn't left her fight. The Council's decree had only strengthened his resolve. If the Centauri were too rigid to see the potential of humanity, he would show them. Meanwhile, aboard the Centauri station, Kaylura stood in the observation deck, the faint hum of the station's systems her only company. The data chip Ethan had given her felt heavy in her hand. She turned it over, her thoughts swirling. The energy core was more than just a piece of technology. It was a symbol of everything they had fought for. Keeping it safe was now her priority, but the Council's watchful eyes made every move a risk. Renvek approached, his presence as imposing as ever. You've been given a chance most wouldn't, he said, his voice low. Don't waste it. Kaylura turned to him, her expression guarded. Why are you helping me, Renvek? What do you stand to gain? Renvek's gaze was steady. I'm not as blind as the Council believes. Change is coming, Kaylura. The question is whether we'll embrace it or let it destroy us. You and your human. You're the first spark of something greater. If you fail, we all lose. His words hung in the air as he handed her a small device. This will scramble their surveillance for a short time. Use it wisely. Ethan's return to Earth was far from a quiet homecoming. He immediately set to work, enlisting the help of Dr. Mira Chen and a small group of trusted scientists. Together, they began refining the energy core, not just as a technological marvel, but as proof of what humanity and the Centauri could accomplish together. Ethan's hope was to create a network of like-minded individuals who believed in the possibility of unity across species. News of the project spread in whispers among Earth's scientific and diplomatic communities. Some called Ethan a visionary, others called him reckless. But the attention also drew the interest of those who sought to exploit the core for their own gain. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before the wrong people came knocking. Months passed, and Kaelura remained under constant surveillance on the Centauri station. She played her role as a compliant former diplomat. But in secret, she was building a network of her own. Through encrypted channels and carefully placed messages, she connected with Centauri dissenters, those who, like Rinvek, believed the Council's rigid laws were stifling their progress. Her greatest ally turned out to be an unlikely one. A young Centauri scientist named Liveth. Liveth had been studying human culture in secret, fascinated by their resilience and creativity. When Kaelura approached her with the data chip, Liveth's eyes lit up with excitement. This technology could change everything, Liveth whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. But if the Council finds out? They won't, Kaelura said firmly. Not if we're careful. But I need your help to protect it. Liveth nodded, her determination mirroring Kaelura's. Then let's get to work. The breakthrough came one quiet evening. Ethan's team successfully created a scaled-up version of the energy core, capable of powering an entire city. The achievement was bittersweet, as he couldn't share it with Kaelura. But he knew the time was drawing near to make their efforts known. If they could present the core to both humanity and the Centauri, it might force the Council to reconsider their stance. Before Ethan could act, a message arrived. An encrypted signal on a frequency only Kaelura would know. His heart leaped as he decoded it. Ethan, I have allies. The core is safe, but the Council is growing suspicious. We must act soon. There's a way for us to meet safely. Coordinates attached. Be careful. Ethan didn't hesitate. He gathered Mira and a small team, ensuring the core's security before boarding a transport ship. The destination was a neutral moon station, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, a place beyond the Council's reach. The reunion was brief, but charged with emotion. Kaelura and Ethan met in a secluded chamber, their eyes locking with unspoken words. Kaelura broke the silence first. The Council won't stand for this, she said. If they find out what we're planning, they'll come after all of us. They already see us as a threat, Ethan replied. But this isn't about them anymore. It's about everyone. Humans, Centauri, and whoever else is out there. If we can show the galaxy what's possible when we work together, maybe we can change things. Kaelura nodded, her resolve firm. Then let's make it count. Their plan unfolded in the days that followed. Kaelura's network within the Centauri began disseminating the energy core's data, framing it as a collaborative achievement between their species. Ethan's team did the same on Earth, presenting it as a gift of unity rather than a technological advancement. The response was immediate and polarizing. Some hailed it as a new era of interstellar cooperation, while others saw it as a dangerous challenge to the established order. The Council's reaction was swift and brutal. They issued a decree labeling Kaelura and her allies as traitors, placing bounties on their heads. But the tide of public opinion was shifting. Centauri citizens, inspired by Kaelura's courage, began questioning the Council's authority. On Earth, protests erupted, demanding official support for Ethan's cause. In the end, it wasn't a single battle that turned the tide, but a series of small victories. The energy core became a symbol of hope, its light illuminating the path to a future where fear no longer dictated the rules. Ethan and Kaelura, though separated by galaxies, remained united in purpose, their connection unbroken. As Kaelura stood on the bridge of a rogue Centauri ship, watching the stars blur into streaks of light, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Somewhere out there, Ethan was looking at the same stars, and together they were rewriting the story of their people. The universe was vast, and the future was theirs to shape.